I thought I was running the show up here. I had come from a background of being a scientist, being very logical, and trying to operate based on data and out of my head. And I discovered within 2 or 3 weeks that fear was running my life. And so when I understood that, then I understood that I needed lift as much as my clients did.
Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. Let's take this time to learn together. This is Andy for the Time with Tim podcast. Today I'm here with two fellow Tim Fletcher company staff members, Kirstin and Charlene. Kirstin and Charlene are lift facilitators and coaches, and 2 years ago we had the opportunity to go through the lift recovery program together. I learned so much from Charlene. Every day she would share something insightful from her young daughter, and I'd always take away some great insight on boundaries, standing up for myself, or respecting myself from her shares. And it showed what a great mother she is and how it reflected back in her daughter. And so even though we're from different countries, Kirstin and I would joke that we were twins from our childhoods, our lives, emotions, and we're so similar. And so I learned so much from her because when she examined a part of herself, it forced me to look at that same part of me. So hi, Kirstin and Charlene. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to spend this time with you both and to dive into a conversation about your experiences and insights. And so here's how I've planned our time together. We'll start with a few warm-up questions to get to know each other better, dive into some discussions about lift and your experiences as facilitators and coaches, and then we'll finish with some reflections and future goals. And so first, I'll ask this to both of you, so whoever would like to go first. My first question is, what do you do for fun or enjoyment outside of the trauma world? How do you recharge and stay balanced?
Okay. There are a couple of things that I do that help me to stay recharged and balanced. I am pretty dedicated to my fitness, and that really seems to make a difference in terms of how I cope from day to day. But in terms of actual fun things, I really enjoy knitting. I've knit a number of sweaters for myself and for loved ones, etc. I also sing in an amateur chamber choir, and we perform about three times a year, but we rehearse on a weekly basis during the academic year. So that opportunity to co-create with other singers, create something beautiful to learn. And it requires you to do lots of deep breathing, lots of controlled deep breathing. And so you practice some of those grounding exercises unconsciously. So those are some of the things that I do.
All of those sound like really great things, like fitness. Fitness is always good, taking care of our body, and that knitting, such like focus and concentration.
And it's got rhythm to it as well. So rhythm is really helpful for grounding. So you're getting into that.
Charlene, what do you do?
Well, I picked up roller skating again.
Amazing.
I take my daughter roller skating, and she's always wanted me to try, but I was like, I'm too old now. And then we went and bought her a pair, and I was like, I'm going to buy myself some too. So I skated around the house, and it was so fun. It was like, just remembering how it felt to be young again. And, so roller skating, I do pottery. I've done pottery since high school. So that's a real nice release. It's when I'm doing that, it's me, myself, and the pot, right? There's no outside world. It's just really meditative. And then other than that, we are big crafters here in this house. So we do a lot of crafting, and we do hiking and paddle boarding during the, when it's nice outside. But and that just rolling around in my roller skates.
Those sound awesome too. I noticed that all of yours include some form of just like being in your body, and being in touch with your body, and then also different levels of kind of curiosity or creativity or enjoyment with it as well. Those sound like beautiful activities.
Thank you.
Uh, and so, since we're complex trauma and recovery coaches, I thought we could also dive off of the deep end as part of our icebreaker. And so, the question I'm going to ask is there any part of you that's like feeling nervous or anxious or vulnerable today? And if not, was there a recent event or situation that kind of threw you off balance and how did you respond? And so, just because I'm throwing this at you, I can go first. And so, about an hour ago, I was noticing there was that part of me that like really needs to do it right. Um, and kind of was just worried about getting this right. And so working with some parts work, just sitting with it, welcoming it. One of the reasons like I actually like had an insight today with it is I realized that one of the reasons that sometimes like words are so hurtful is that as a child, when there were hurtful words, there was also physical pain as well as like abandonment pain. And so that little child part of me doesn't realize that if he makes a mistake, that there's not going to be kind of like this physical or abandonment abuse that comes along with it. And so, just with the tools and the skills that I've learned is just like kind of sitting with it, being with it, but also really letting that little child know that, nobody's, um, that I could keep him safe, that he could be safe with me. And so it was just really valuable to be able to come back and be grounded in the present and like it's like not worry about that worry, but to integrate that and to just be with it and welcome it in a different way. And so I don't know if Kirsten, if you would like to share something first that maybe makes you feel been feeling nervous, anxious, or vulnerable recently.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, on an ongoing basis, I tend to have still a low level anxiety level. Definitely, my coping mechanisms are a lot better since Lyft, but also my awareness, my self awareness is higher, and I've had to come to an awareness in the past half year, I'd say, that I sort of have this constant low level fear. It's been a little bit higher in the past weekend or so because I also in my spare time I sit on a board, a professional board, and we're just founding, and this is for the field of professional health advocacy. And so we are trying to lay a framework for accreditation and governing standards within Canada. And we had a board meeting last Wednesday, and it was like, okay, good, then that'll be off my plate. But at the board meeting, we decided that between December and January, we need to write a bunch of new policies. So just at the busiest time of year, we need to build in these extra working meetings into our evenings, and so just feeling the stress of that in December, preparing for Christmas. Thankfully, choir stuff is a little bit calmer. We had a concert a week ago, but that good stress that was part of that sort of carried forward. So there's just a lot going on. But what I have been doing, similar to you, is I'm noticing it, and I wouldn't say that I'm specifically doing parts work, but I just come in as a motherly figure, and I say, oh, I can see that you're feeling so scared, and that's really hard, and I'm just going to be with you. And I know that doesn't necessarily work for all the parts depending on how old it is, but I really came to recognize this morning as I was approaching that part that I think the reason it works is that was one of those things, those fears that was instilled pre-verbally, that in order to have worth, I needed to be that good girl, and if I wasn't good by whatever definition that was, then that was going to lead to abandonment and being told that I wasn't good enough, and that was a very fearful thing. So I can approach that and envision myself scooping up a 2-year-old in my arms, and that tends to calm it.
Yeah. As you talk about that nurturing part, like I could see you like really deeply connecting with that, and I could feel it as well. Just like through the camera as you're talking to that part. I'm glad that you've got that a tool and skill to work with those. And Charlene, how about you?
Well, This weekend I had a family get together, and but it was extended family that I haven't seen in a long time, and shame came up because I had kind of disappeared from that side of the family due to a lot of the things that were going on in my life before Lyft. And so the shame was of what people I wanted to be perfect, right? I want to present in a certain way, and that's how I always have, right? So I'm presenting in a more vulnerable way where people know my insecurities and vulnerabilities. So therefore, I have to really be mindful of when my part of me wants to go down the lane of going to shame, right? There's a part of me that says, well, you're not good enough, and you did bad things, so you shouldn't be accepted. And so then that will spark my striving to be perfect, to try harder. And I know that that doesn't work anymore for me. And that's not how I want to live my life, is striving for perfection, for validation from the outside world. That seems to be my pattern. So I felt like I was pretty mindful while I was there. And then I left there and I went to my mother's house for her birthday to take her to dinner. And then I was met with a lot of one-sided conversation that was about her a lot. And I was feeling like I needed some engagement, right, with another human. But I know that I won't be able to get that from my mom. So, before Lyft, I would have gone down a rabbit hole of shame, of abandonment, of, for somebody, my mother not listening to me, not being receptive to me. So I had to be very conscious, very mindful of how I was feeling. And I would go inside and soothe myself, soothe my inner child, let her know that she was okay and that she is still important, even if everybody, someone else can't see that, right? That she's okay and that she's safe and that I'm here for her. I am here for her. And so I had done that on Saturday, and then Sunday was okay. But yesterday it was hitting a little more. I know that there was some unresolved things from the weekend. So when I started to feel a bit of sadness creeping up, I sat with it for a while and just acknowledged, of course I'm sad. Of course, I would feel this way because of what I've been through in my life. And then also just making new contacts in the world, or not new contacts, but connection in the world that's not conducive to healing, right? Because you're not going to find that connection everywhere. So anyway, so yesterday I was able to do some tapping exercises to release the grief. And I also did a meditative exercise just to calm my nervous system so that I could start thinking with my cortex. And yeah, it's a journey, it's a process. And it's always that being aware of when it's going to come back up, right? When it kind of peeks its little head, and then we have to start doing things to soothe that part of us that's triggered.
Thanks for sharing that, Charlene. One of the things that I really heard in what you said was kind of this courage, this bravery of being able to express yourself vulnerably with others, but then also in kind of how you nurture that inner child and how you speak to it. There's a lot of this courage and bravery and strength in that. I think too, this will be a good transition. You mentioned a little bit of kind of who you were now and the tools that you have now versus what we had pre-lift. And so I'll direct this to you first, Charlene. So I'd love for each of you to just share a bit about what brought you to the Lift program and maybe what was happening in your life at that time.
Sure. Um, I think what the journey towards Lyft started about 10 years ago. I had my daughter. She's 12 now, but 2 years in after having her, I started suffering with a lot of depression. Um, I had resigned from my job so that I could be a mom. And looking back, I know what was going on, but I'll stay with where I was. So I became a mom, and so I let go of my career, and I wasn't finding fulfillment in being, because I wanted to be the perfect mom, and that wasn't seemingly possible at that time. So I was striving for this perfection, striving for perfection in my marriage, um, striving for perfection of just my exterior world. Um, and none of that was being validated by the outside world. And because I couldn't give myself any validation because I didn't know how, I was looking at it for the outside world, and I wasn't getting it, which would cause me to go into a huge depression. Um, and but depression to the point where I couldn't get out of bed. Um, I would start drinking, and it was like a cycle. So I would strive, I would try, I would keep trying. It wouldn't work. And then I would drink and stay asleep for 3 days or more, and just wake up to drink again and go back to sleep and wake up to drink again. The pain was so deep. And then I would get out of it, and the shame was huge. And so the shame would cause me to strive to be better. And the shame would just keep pushing me. And then there would be no payoff, no feeling good about myself. So the cycle would go again. So I tried antidepressants. I tried, inpatient treatment for alcoholism, because that's just, I thought alcohol was my only problem. If I could just put the bottle down and walk away, I would be fine. And so that didn't work. I went to rehab probably about 3 times, and that wasn't working. And I tried AA, and that wasn't working because I felt like it was more shaming for me. And I felt like I had done a great job doing that to myself, shaming myself, and why would I need more? So I kept looking, and I was looking at YouTube. I finally turned to YouTube for some mental health, something to help me out, something to figure out what was going on with me. And then finally I found Tim Fletcher's videos of the 60 characteristics. And I was like, bingo. And I also didn't realize that I would have to go back into my childhood. I thought my childhood was done. I thought that was in the past, and it had nothing to do with my present being. So I had never, ever looked to see what the relation to my child, from my childhood to my adult person, if I didn't realize there was a correlation. So, yeah. And so when I found Tim, I was I was really stunned. I was very hopeful, but I also was very shocked by the fact that my childhood, my upbringing could have such a profound effect on my life. I thought it was all me, I was calling the shots, but it's usually how you're raised. Starts calling the shots. So
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like it's such an individual story, but it's also there's so many things that are recognizable of a lot of other people who come in of, the perfectionism, depression, huge life changes, and then also just kind of like searching, being on the search to find answers and just not really understanding what's going on. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really glad for many reasons. I'm glad that you were able to find the program and that we're still here today. Kirsten, how would you answer that? What brought you to the Lift program and what was happening in your life at the time?
Yeah, so I was interested in Lyft mainly from a professional point of view. I had been working as a professional health advocate for a number of years, and so I was an independent practitioner and was working one on one with clients who hired me to help them navigate difficult medical journeys. So it could include a lot of practical navigation, but at times could also include emotional navigation because depending on what you're going through, there can be a really big emotional component to it. In terms of what I was doing for myself at the time, in the year leading up to it, I had already been working through some of Brene Brown's stuff, especially her first book, which focuses on women and shame, and the title is something along the lines of I thought it was just me, but it wasn't, or but it isn't. So I had already been examining shame to a degree, and one of the clients that I work with now that I have done Lift, I know acutely that he has complex trauma, but even then we knew that he was dealing with well, I guess he had been diagnosed with complex PTSD already by his some of his care providers, and he had several of the quite a number of the standardized adverse childhood events from his childhood. And so there was one time when we were talking through a particular instance, or we were messaging back and forth, and there was a lot of, he was expressing anger, this, that, and the other thing, and I said, you know what? I suspect that there may be shame underneath there. I knew enough to know that anger could be a secondary emotion that may be hiding something more vulnerable. And so this client then started doing a deep dive into shame and started Googling, videos on shame, and he started searching YouTube, and he found Tim Fletcher's series on shame, and he sent that to me. And so I watched, I think it was a 6 or 7 video series on shame, and I'm like, yeah, that all tracks with what I was learning with Brene Brown. And I started looking at his website and discovered, oh, he's Canadian, I'm Canadian. So there was immediately some sort of resonance there. But it just in general, I was impressed with the mission that he had. And I thought, you know what? I would really love to get a little bit more insight on how to work with clients who are having some of these emotional struggles. And so I contacted them, had a bit of a chat with the business lead, Shannon, and she said, well, okay, so yeah, you can, there's a potential that there could be partnerships down the line, but first you would have to go through the Lift program before you could take the training program to become a facilitator and learn the skills. And so I hummed and hawed, and then there was finally a little impetus for me to join. And the thing that really stood out for me when I joined was how quickly, especially going into the 60 characteristics, it was like, within 2 or 3 weeks, I'm like, I thought I was running the show up here. I had come from a background of being a scientist, being very logical, and trying to operate based on data and out of my head. And I discovered within 2 or 3 weeks that fear was running my life. I was afraid of all of these shame lies that would reveal my lack of worth, and that was what was leading me. And so when I understood that, then I understood that I needed Lyft as much as my clients did, and I needed it also so that I would be in less of a codependent relationship with the clients that I was serving, so I could show up for them more wholly, more healthily, which means having some boundaries. I could still help with purpose, but it wasn't necessarily just to fill a void in my life.
Yeah, so I don't think I totally knew your full background before coming in, and that coming in as a professional. I think one of the things that I appreciate even more about you now is there a lot of people who do come in as a helping professional, they start off with this attitude of, I'm not here for me. I'm here for other people. And what do I do? I remember you. I don't remember it taking 2 or 3 weeks, but I kind of remember you just diving in and like really focusing on yourself and your healing and your growth, which is it's a transition that we do see a lot with professionals. That it usually takes a little bit of time before they wake up one day and it's like, oh, this is touching really close to home right now.
Yeah, no, I have seen that with when we see people with help who are helping professionals. But I guess what you say is true. I mean, if I'm going to do the program, I'm like, I'm gonna do the program. I'm going to get, and I was already practicing something with a group of people where it was like I was used to being vulnerable. I was used to examining my inner world. So I already brought those tools with me, and I was prepared to do the deep dives.
Yeah, it's so valuable to do it for yourself. And I think you talked too about kind of that move from head into our body. And so I think with that, like maybe we can talk a little bit about our experiences in the Lift program. I know it's 75 days, and so we could probably spend a week or a month talking about the whole thing. And so I'll just ask like maybe some more like a general or a specific question. And so my first question, and I'll give this back to you again, Kirsten, is, what was one pivotal moment during your time in the Lift program that deeply impacted you?
I think the pivotal piece was when we started looking at the inner child in phase two. Um, so I had transitioned to phase two just before Christmas of 2022. And I started noticing about a week or so before Christmas, I was like, I'm starting to notice the signs that my stress is getting higher. And in particular, like just getting out of the car and dropping something as I'm rushing into the house. I'm starting to swear or, like drop F bombs and things like that. And that is not my usual way of speaking. And that is not my preferred way of speaking. And I'm like, okay, this tells me something really important that I need to be more compassionate to myself. I need to start slowing down a little bit. And because we had just started talking, at least in concept, about the inner child, I thought, okay, this what can I do in the midst of Christmas and Christmas preparations that will start to help me feel calmer? And I thought, okay, let's turn some of these things into play and let's try and connect with that inner child and engage her in play. So I was very intentional about decorating the Christmas tree that year. As I set out to decorate the Christmas tree, I was like, okay, little Kirstin, you are going to come with me and let's turn this into a creative activity. And there was also a wedding that we were attending right around the new year, and it was a very informal sort of a wedding and reception, and the guests were asked to bring desserts for like a buffet sort of thing. And I was just gonna to make and decorate some cupcakes, and so I engaged little Kirsten in that. And so for a while, it was sort of just that little reaching out, engaging her in things that I knew that she loved to do. And then February rolled around, and I think this happened. The real turning point happened for me, actually at choir rehearsal. Our director had programmed a really, really difficult emotional piece called the seven last words of, or the last words of seven black men, or something along those lines. I cannot remember the exact title. I do apologize. But the idea was that we were singing the last words of seven black men who had been killed at the hands of authorities. And there was one movement in particular that during rehearsal, during the first part of rehearsal, must have really agitated me. And I remember going into the washroom during the 15-minute break and just saying to that inner child, it's okay. We're safe here. You're not in danger, but you are safe. We are here. We are safe. And in that moment was when I started to be able to make that real connection with that inner child, to be able to see her. I have a photo over there on my shelf that is me about 7 years old with my younger brother, who would have been about 4. And so I could see her very, very clearly. And in moments when anxiety was coming up, when pain was coming up, anything that was really, really strong, being able to visualize her and being able to reach out to her with compassion, with warmth, with loving arms, that was when everything started to change. That was also when I started being able to validate myself. Because all those times when people say, oh, you just need to use affirmations, talk to yourself in affirming words, it always felt like a lie. I could not internalize it. But as soon as I was talking to an external being, even though that external being was still me and was still intimately connected to me, then I could speak it truthfully, and it actually flowed back inwards. And so that was when the compassion really, the self-compassion, the self-validation really started to land, and when the transformation really changed for me.
Yeah, I remember that time as you were going through and how deeply you connected to that inner child. And I think those are two of the really what you said at the end is two of the biggest pieces of that inner child work is it's that self-compassion, that validation, it's that reparenting work. I was wondering, as a heady, logical, rational person, a lot of people when they're first exposed to inner child, it seems kind of phooey, it seems kind of out there, it seems kind of weird. Is there like to tell me as somebody who's just like hearing about it for the first time and I'm like, this is weird. Like, do you have like a 1 or 2 minute explanation that would kind of make me interested or turn me over to be open to exploring this tool, this modality?
Totally. I mean, first I want to validate that, yes, I had some skepticism at first as well, because I was like, I don't understand what this inner child was. But when I could see when I could see through the content how much it had affected some of the previous facilitators, I thought, okay, this is worth some investigation. And I could see the connection to my history. So my explanation that I tend to give people in class is that our inner children come from past hurts and wounds that we experienced. And because when we experienced them as a child, the child operates primarily out of the limbic brain, that emotional piece of the brain. And when they get hurt that way, they kind of freeze at that age. So there are parts of us, these wounded childhood parts, that just stay the same age and they never progress beyond that point. And in order to heal them, we need to start giving them the things that they never received in childhood, those unmet needs that we talk about with respect to the 12 needs. My question is typically to participants, what did you need at that moment in time? If you had a healthy parent that came to you, a healthy, reliable adult in your life that you felt safe with, what did you need from them? What did you need to hear from them? What did you need to feel from them? And so, especially when I try and tie it back, like, yes, you are an adult in front of me, but there are parts of you, and these are the wounded parts that have stayed really, really young and that need the healing right now.
Yeah, yeah, I really think that connecting like the brain science and the limbic brain and just how you talk to it. I don't know. I keep getting lost as you're talking. I really really want to sign up for a coaching session with you. We
Thanks,
do some
Andy.
inner child work. I just want you to. I don't know. There's a part of me I love hearing kind of that gentle, nurturing voice that you're able to use with it. So thanks for sharing that,
Thanks,
Kirsten.
Andy.
And then I'll ask that same question to you, Charlene. What was one pivotal moment during your journey in the Lift program that deeply impacted you?
I think when it was the topic of boundaries,
Mm,
I didn't know there was such a thing as boundaries. I didn't know I could have boundaries. Yeah, I was enmeshed in with other people, with in my career, in my personal life, I couldn't see the difference between myself and other people. I could take on their personalities. I could take on their pain for them. I just didn't know that we were separate, and I could have my own feelings and my own thoughts and be my own person, right? That there was a difference between us in this world. And so when I heard that, when I was, it was like somebody gave me a huge gift. Like, here, this is your right as a human being, is to be able to give yourself external and internal boundaries. And my mind was blown. It was like somebody gave me the key to the city. I was like, wow, okay. So external boundaries for me now look like, well, back then, obviously there were none. And external boundaries to me is what's going to keep me safe, right? What's my limitation between you and me, or the event and myself? There is a differentiation now. Instead of just being fully immersed and doing and being what other people want me to be, or what I'm taking in of other people, and then I'll become that. It's I am me and you are you, right? So so that was huge for me. And then internal boundaries, because my inner children were running amok. They were, used to instant gratification, right? So when there was pain, I would seek instant gratification. I would seek relief, from that. I would seek gratification from even other people, right? To give me my validation so that I can feel okay inside. So, and also, the boundaries of taking care of myself. So that's where my inner parent comes in and starts to reparent my inner children, like Kirstin was saying, but compassionately and lovingly telling my inner children that want to just go to bed without brushing their teeth, that want to eat whatever they want, that want to just zone out on TV. My inner myself, okay, I can come in and say, okay, we've had enough here and we really want to take care of ourselves. So, maybe we can brush our teeth and we'll feel better in the morning. Or, we just want to love ourselves and take care of ourselves now. And it's just a loving act for me. So, and it's not perfect. It's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the parent doesn't show up and the kids are running amok. So, but more, at least there's a parent present now, because I think before Lyft, I didn't have those boundaries. I didn't have that parental voice in my head telling me that I'm worthy to do these things for myself, and that I matter, and that I'm okay if I take space up in the world, right? I'm allowed to.
Wonderful. I can see as you share, I'm really connecting to kind of that guidance system that you as a parent can offer. Because often, people will see if somebody's setting a boundary for us, that it's a prison or a jail cell, or you can only see the limitations. But as you're speaking, I can see how like the boundaries can also just be really loving too. I'm gonna assume or project like further from there is like as you said, boundaries for yourself. Are you noticing that that's such a like? How do you notice in your life that that's a loving act for yourself?
It shows up physically. It shows up with a sensation of like almost a soothing sensation of like, wow, I'm taking care of myself. Like I matter. I love myself, right? Like I want to do these things for me instead of just for the outside world now. Okay, because before it was only on the outside world. And so, yeah, it's a loving presence. And yeah, it just really helps to guide me in the right direction as far as what to do in life, right? Because I didn't have a roadmap. I didn't have a lighthouse, right? I didn't have when the oceans are treacherous, I didn't have anything to look towards so that to get any kind of comfort. So yeah, just developing that parental loving relationship with myself.
Yeah, yeah, I can really see too in how you're sharing. There's a lot of ways that we can describe shame, and I'd say one of them is shame is this devaluing of yourself. And what I hear, is you're loving yourself. You're really showing this act of valuing yourself, and you're valuing yourself, having self-worth, taking care of yourself, and being there for yourself. It sounds like it's a really beautiful thing. And so I'll ask you. I think you both offered some really good points here of some of the tools that we learn or that we get exposed to with the inner child, the parts work, and also the boundaries. And so was lift a thing for you, Charlene? Where like on day one, you're like, yeah, I'm good, I'm healed. Can you tell me? Can you tell me maybe just a little bit about your like an overview of your journey through it, and maybe phase one and phase two. Kind of what are some highlights of where you were on your path and what was happening as you were looking at these materials and learning these tools?
Yeah. I think for me in phase one, a lot of the material was shocking. It was, it would take my breath away, cause a lot of shame within me, provoke shame. Obviously, I have shame present anyway, but it would provoke that shame, but also kind of gave me permission to acknowledge that shame, right? To be like, there is a reason behind these behaviors that I've had, right? There's something deeper. It's not just that I'm unworthy or that I'm a defective human being. It's because of things that I had learned in my past, right? But going through, so it was like a loving, let's just go ahead and open up this Pandora's box a bit, just a little bit at a time, right? Enough for us to take these things in and just kind of process like, wow, all of these behaviors that I have been doing all of my life and tracing them back. It's like an investigation to when you were young, right? And so, but in the beginning, it felt to me more like, okay, I'm learning something new. It kind of hurts. I'm really hurting here. And so when I would come to group, that was the saving grace for me, is coming to group with all of my revelations, with all of my connecting the dots of behaviors and past behaviors and present behaviors, and so I could go into class and I could share these things, this shame that I had around who I was and what I've done in my life. And I could share that and others would share the same. And then I felt less shame. I felt more like, these people get it. We are all the same. I can identify with you. You might not have a drinking problem. You might have, I don't know, something else, anything else. But I can identify with you because the roots are the same. Our behaviors are different of how we have come up with solutions to how we can behave in the world so that we feel safe, right? So going to phase one and having the other people, you too, to listen to, and it really helped. And then for phase two, that's more intense. So that was a lot more revelations. The shame was really, really hard for me to get a grasp on. It's really deep. But when I started noticing my behaviors, when I was able to slow down enough and regulate myself enough to notice when a behavior was starting to come up, or when a trigger was activated, and then I could start to address it. But phase two was very intense. But it just felt like almost like coming home every day, right? To people that can understand you in the world, to people you can identify with, and they can identify with you. So, and then when I was done with phase two, I didn't feel like my healing was complete. I knew that I needed more, and I have since learned that it's a lifetime healing process. And so I continued my healing with Keys with Tim Fletcher. It's another program 2 days a week. And I continued my healing through Keys. And, it wasn't even until I got to Keys that I was able to let go of some of my resentments towards other people, like bigger resentments, smaller resentments I could let go. But, and then while I was in Keys, I decided I wanted to do the Compass training program, to become a facilitator. And I thought, well, I should probably go through phase two again. Because why not? Because I feel like a lot of it we miss, and because we're dysregulated, we're taking in so much information, and some of the points that are made, you're not ready for. We're not ready to take it in. We're not ready to open our mind to those topics. So some of the material I feel like I just kind of missed. And even to this day, when I'll facilitate, I'll rewatch a video that I've seen so many times, right? And I pick up something, I'm like, where was I when that, and I was thinking, well, I wasn't ready. So yeah, that was my journey.
I think you covered a lot there, and like really focusing on how it is such an ongoing process, and it's like there's so deep and there's so much with it. With kind of opening that Pandora's box, it sounds like you experienced a lot of pain and shame and hurt as you were going through this. Were there any points where you kind of felt that you wanted to run away or quit? What stopped you from doing that?
There was, there were many times that I wanted to quit, thinking that felt desperation. It was too much pain. It was opening a lot of, unlocking a lot of memories that I had buried, especially from childhood. Memories that I just kind of put to bed and said, that's just the way it was. And that's just, so opening those up again and looking at them from a different point of view, like all 4 angles, right? And so that way I can understand it better, process what happened, and then help my inner child understand. But also then going in and grieving those losses that comes last. But yeah, it's a pretty heavy process, but it's worth it. But also I found in the process of the program that when I did have 3 days off or 4 days off or something, I was yearning to get back to the healing. I was wanting more, to get more, so that I could, and not in a neurotic way. It was a, this is healthy. This is what healthy looks like, and I kind of want more of that, right? So,
Uh, it sounds like such a loving process, like focusing on yourself and just kind of being with it in that way. And something you said there, with the wanting to come back, and earlier you'd mentioned, I think you'd said like homecoming a little bit. One of the things that I point out to clients a lot is that, shame is it lives in silence, it lives in darkness, it lives in isolation. And one of the key elements of self-compassion is finding that common humanity. And so recognizing where our story and our journey reflect back in other people, or maybe the light shines just a little bit different off of your story and off of mine, but just really kind of finding that common humanity and knowing that we're not alone, and that we're all experiencing these experiences together in our own ways, and yet also so often similarly. Thanks so much for sharing that, Charlene. And I'll ask you too, Kirsten. What were kind of some of your general experiences or observations as you went through phase one and phase two? Was it all doom and gloom? Were you in a happy place during it?
Well, definitely for phase one, that felt really, really heavy, and I hear that a lot from clients as well. It's that emotional heaviness, but it also creates a certain fatigue, and because I am the sort who jumps in with both feet whole hog, I'd spend, we would get the handouts. I would first go through the handouts and sort of highlight some main ideas. And then I would listen to the videos with the handout in front of me and be adding more notes. And then I would go through and then I would answer the questions. So in addition to the hour and a half that we spent with the group, I was probably spending another hour and a half on my own in preparation each day. So that took an awful lot of time. And so I was noticing that part. But definitely as we continued through phase one and we continued peeling the onion, or, another analogy that we give a lot of people is, as I kept on uncovering more puzzle pieces, and completing a fuller picture of what my trauma looked like and what the sources were. Similar to what Charlene was saying, there was just so much shame coming up because I had this perception that overall I was a pretty good person. And I guess a lot of people would probably still see that, but there were a lot of ways where it was like, oh, I can see how I do some of these maladaptive behaviors in and hurtful behavior, or like from a hurtful self-serving perspective. And so going back to what I was mentioning before about, one of the core shame lies that I struggle with is that I have to be good in order to have worth. And so as I'm, pulling up little pieces and questioning whether I'm a good person or not, it's also bringing up questions of whether or not I am worthy. And so you can feel the weight of that shame just growing heavier and heavier through phase one. I don't remember what the early stages were like in phase two, but I do know that phase two was sort of where I tend to mark phase one as this is where we start to put the whole picture together so that we have the awareness. Phase two is where we start working with that content and start finding a way forward. So whilst phase two is heavy, I tend to think of it as where we're starting to make progress and come to truth and come to that place where we are actually growing healthier. So I'm not, obviously that became more true when I started to make that strong connection with my inner child. But that's sort of how I perceive the two phases. Phase one is laying the groundwork, and it can be super painful because there's a lot of hidden content that we have to pull out into the light. But phase two is where the rubber really, really hits the road in my mind.
It sounds like you kind of really, you just mentioned the rubber hitting the road, and that sounds kind of how you took your approach to the whole program, just like really diving into it and really doing the work. I'm going to ask you a similar question as what I asked Charlene. Is there, diving into it and looking so hard and with all of the shame and issues of worth coming up, was there any point where you just kind of didn't want to show up or didn't come, and what made you keep going?
I mean, I think there was a single-mindedness about I'm going to get to the Compass program. So one of those unhealthy coping mechanisms, like you set a goal, and it's like I'm doing this come hell or high water. I mean, I think it was still a good thing, and what I needed ultimately when I got to Compass, like similar to what Charlene was depicting, like going through Compass and continuing to facilitate. It continues to be an ongoing growing process. But going back to then, yes, it was heavy. The single-mindedness kept me focused to keep going, but the other reality is, as I mentioned, I had already several years of experience with a practice of showing up with a group, and knowing how healing it is just to be seen and heard and validated. And that was what the day-to-day groups were for me. It allowed me to be seen in my pain. So being in group, there was the process of being heard as well as normalizing, because the stories were so common. Looking at the backgrounds of where we were, what we had experienced, as Charlene said, the individual stories could be very, very unique, but the way it showed up in us in terms of the pain that we had, that was pretty universal. And having heard the lessons from Tim, how we all are coping with messages, or with emotions of pain and messages that have shamed us throughout our lives, and just seeing how we've all picked that up, how we're all living in ways that are trying to make us feel loved, that are trying to make us feel worthy, that are trying to make us feel safe. And so all of those things, it was helpful to put the pieces together, but more than anything, it was the connection piece. And I think at the time, I'm not sure if it's still on the website, but something that was never more true for me was seeing on Tim's website that we grow through connection, that the healing comes through connection. And so when I started receiving the emails, for example, from the admin people, and many of them signed off with the phrase "with love," it felt like genuine compassion and love, and that has stayed with me, and that's what I've kept as my signature. Now that I'm working for Tim Fletcher, it's like, is there any kind of protection on that, or may I use that? And like, no, please use that. I'm like, I would love to be able to use that, because truly it is a gesture of love that we are showing up in community and showing up for one another. That is the biggest part of the healing for me, is that connection.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That connection is so important, and especially as you were saying, that just that being seen and heard and validated, as children, we're so often just kind of like maybe missed or brushed over, and even in our adult relationships, we're so focused on other things, and so to really be there and develop that relationship and that connection, it's so valuable. I'm going to ask, you both mentioned a little bit Compass, kind of the Compass training, which is our training program for coaches and facilitators. And so what I'm just going to ask is, now as you're both in that role, signing with love on your signature, on your emails, maybe what do you find most rewarding about your work as a coach and a facilitator? And I'll ask this to you first, Kirsten.
For me, a lot of people are probably going to think this is totally weird. But what is the greatest honor for me is when a person is deep in emotion and allows me to hold space for them. That they can show up, and I can be with them, and I can let them know that their emotions that they for most of their life have probably shoved down as not good enough, as dangerous, and any of those messages, any of those beliefs about emotions, I can say, you are allowed to feel what you're feeling. You're allowed to feel that pain. You are allowed to feel that shame. I am with you. Even while you feel this, I wish I could fix it for you. I cannot, but I can be present with you right now.
One of my definitions of love is being with what is, and in what you shared right there, it sounds like it's such a loving way to be with other people. It must be so valuable for them to receive.
Yeah, that seems to be the feedback, because afterwards then they can come, even if they have been, even if there is a certain element of shame of expressing the emotions, we come out on the other side together. There is relief from having released some of that burden. There's often a process of grounding that we go through, but sometimes it's just simply holding space for what has never been allowed to come out into the light. And while it doesn't heal everything, it provides healing in that moment for what was coming up.
I can see that being so valuable. I'm gonna shift the question just a little bit for you, Charlene, and maybe if you could just answer, what's something that you've learned from coaching others or facilitating others that's surprised you?
Ooh. I would say the amount of growth that I actually experienced through it, because of being able to hold space for someone else, being able to listen to their shame, their struggles, to be able to take that in and give them a way to look at it in a different perspective. It feels empowering for myself to be able to do that for someone, but also when I pivot that and look at where I was, right? And I can imagine myself as them where they are and figure out, what do you need, right? What would I have needed at that point? And then we can try, right? That part. And if that doesn't work, we'll change it. But it's really interesting to go in and remember your own story, and then just bring up what they might need at that moment. But it's so nourishing to my heart and my soul to be able to just open up my mind with no judgment, with no preconceived notions, and just take what this person, their pain, their wins, even, their wins are always celebrated with me. It's a cheerleading session at the end of every session, right? So and I think to myself, I talk to people differently. Like I interact with people differently on a whole different plane, right? A vulnerable and emotional plane that's just beautiful, right? Because it's love, essentially, like signed with love. I mean, it's a loving gesture to hold that space, like Kirstin was saying, and it's also a loving gesture for yourself, right? To take in someone else's pain, to give them a little bit of healing, and then to celebrate those wins. Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really able to look at your own healing journey, just kind of walk on in the shoes with somebody else as there earlier on in that process. And I said this to Kirsten earlier. I'd love to do a coaching session with you as well. I want some of that cheerleading at the end. I love that. I can just imagine and that it. And I can feel that experience right now of you kind of like cheering on. It's like it's nice to kind of pass on that energetic, positive energy as well. Just like really being there for it.
Right? Those wins, those small wins are huge. They're phenomenal. And um, people with complex trauma, we tend to not celebrate those kind of wins. So
Hmm.
really celebrating those is really healing for another person, for me to celebrate it and them to recognize it in themselves.
And so, both of you are at this point in your journey where you've discovered the lift program, went through the lift program, did this additional training, and now you're at this place of kind of helping others and working with others through their trauma, walking along them with that journey. What if you could give like if there's somebody who, maybe runs across this and they're not sure about beginning this journey themselves, if there's like a piece of advice that you could give to them as they're just starting their recovery journey, what would that be? And I'll ask that of you first, Charlene.
It would be to, if they were just starting this journey, it would be to, it would be to love themselves, but that's hard for us to do, right? So I can say that from this point of view when I've been through it. But when we're in the depths of this darkness, it's so hard. So it's just, I think, the reaching, right? It's just for me like that visualization of reaching out for that help. Just, just with a one finger, keep just reaching for that, and strive to be able to take in that you're important enough to be in this program, to heal, to receive, the information, to receive the feedback that they get in the facilitating, and to receive it with like an open mind and an open heart. But I know that these are big struggles for us in the beginning. But if I can only picture, I just have a picture of someone just trying to reach out for help. And if they just keep that image in their mind of reaching for that, and we're going to grab that hand and pull you in with love and with care and compassion. And yeah, that's what I would say is just keep reaching. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I really hear you acknowledging the struggle that people come into this because, a lot of us are kind of feel like we're hitting our head against the wall or we have these relationship difficulties for so long. We just kind of feel like stuck or hopeless. But feel like that's like the life that we're destined to continue to live. And so that image of just this hand that it can be something different and that I matter and I'm worth it as well. Yeah, yeah, that's so beautiful. And Kirsten, is there any advice that you would give to people as they're thinking about beginning their recovery journey?
I think similar to what I needed at the start of the journey, I think connection is a really, really, really big piece. But I also know that feeling like you can show up and connect and be vulnerable with people for a lot of people is going to be really, really, really challenging because trust issues are a very common coping mechanism, like not trusting other people with your information, not trusting other people's words back to you, none of those things. So if that is a barrier for you, I would say show up and listen to the other stories with the intention to understand. You are not there to respond to them. You are not there to give them advice. Show up to hear their struggles, show up to understand what they were going through. You had already shared, Andy, that we commonly, our stories would bounce off of one another. One of us would say something and it would evoke memories in the other person that maybe we hadn't thought of when we were doing our own work, or we would say the exact same thing. But one way or another, you you start to find the common humanity, you start to feel not so alone, and you also start to understand yourself better through listening to others, and that starts to open up the space that maybe these are safe people, maybe I'm not on the journey alone, maybe I am worthy of connecting with people. So there's that piece, but I also want to bring up what Charlene said about celebrating the small wins. And this was one of the discoveries shared discoveries that I had with one of my earliest coaching clients when I was still going through Compass. I was trying to encourage my client to just celebrate the small wins. And she then proceeded to, start building a diagram in her journal in front of me. And she went, wait a minute. If I keep on stacking these small wins, eventually I get to the top of the mountain. And the other point that we extrapolated from that is when we take these small wins, when we strive for a small goal, if there's a failure, you don't fall nearly as far as if you try and take a big leap and then fall flat on your face and possibly roll back further than you were. So by taking small risks, you're laying a solid foundation. The risks are not as big if you fail. And if you keep on taking those baby steps, you do eventually get to the very top of your mountain.
Yeah, I like that. Taking the baby steps, and I think with that is it's so valuable to kind of have the coaches and facilitators on that journey with you, and really that group. Charlene had said earlier that kind of coming home to this group where we can be open and vulnerable. So as we look forward, um, wondering what's maybe one area in your own personal or professional growth that you're focusing on right now? And I'll just share one of my own. For me, 2024 was really about working on love and continuing to learn how to love myself more and looking at kind of the emotional skill set, the social skill set, and the other tools that I can do for myself. And so what I've realized is that for 2025, I'm going to take a subtle approach to boundaries, to agency, assertiveness, and boundaries, to really get to that place to say yes when I want to say yes, but to say no when I want to say no, but also developing more of that awareness of my own needs and wants, so that I can continue to learn to better meet them for myself. And so I'll ask you first, Kirsten, what's an area that you're hoping to continue to grow in personally or professionally?
I think what I am discovering that needs some attention right now is how how to respond to that part in me that freezes when I'm dealing with somebody in a position of power who is throwing some of their aggression around. It may not even necessarily be a really overt yelling or power play, but there is some kind of power play that suggests that I need to play small in order to stay safe, and that automatically puts me into this freeze mode. So building up, shoring up the resources I think in my adult self to feel like I do have the agency, I do have the skills, that I can show up, I can express my voice, that I don't need to shut down, that I don't need to let that fearful child part pull me into shutdown so that I go automatically into freeze mode. So I think there needs to be a lot of validation of the fear that is there, that showed up earlier on, but then it is also starting to install this confidence that the adult can manage, has the resources to speak up, for myself, for others, whatever is at hand, and that I can have a voice.
Yeah, there's a lot of knowledge there, kind of knowing what specifically to focus on. And so I'm excited. I need a reminder in 4 months. I want to check in with you and see where we are on these growth journeys
We'll
together.
see.
Yeah. And Charlene, is there one area that you're working on or focusing on right now?
Yeah. And I love the fact that you pulled in the new year, because that's like that's a good starting goal, right? Although I've been noticing, right? The first step is to notice what's going on that you want to change, right? Whatever you want to work on. And for myself, whew, um, so my codependency is always been very very strong. since childhood. And I was, trained to be attuned to other people's needs and wants and their emotional states. So much so that I look through my life and I can see that almost every action, every relationship, every behavior had to do with what was going on in the outside world and how that affected me and how I looked in the outside world, right? So that includes like motivation for like going to work. You're expected, people are expecting you to go there, right? So you go and you show up, right? And then, for example, you are keeping your home nice, and there is an expectation from a partnership that you both do your share, okay? But for myself, my motivation has come through what others might expect of me. So instead of that balanced expectations in a home, it's I will do as much as I can for you so that you can notice me. Please see me. Please acknowledge my existence and my value. And that was in every realm of my life. So now taking that codependent part away, what is my motivation for keeping my home clean, for striving and, professionally, for even my self-care, right? For working out used to be for how I would look in the outside world, not for who I am and how I feel. So when I took all of these motivators away, where do I get my motivation now? So that's when the inner parent comes in. However, I need more creative manners, more understanding of my inner world, to be able to kind of continue to build this resilience and this ability to want to do things for myself, right? It's just for myself. And so I celebrate the small wins is what I've got to say here, because it is a huge process. Taking all of those motivators away is really, wow, 'cause you're left with, whoa, why do I do anything in life? There's no payoff. There's nothing coming in, no gas, nothing. So it has to come from within me. So anyway, that's what I am working on this year.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a huge area coming from like the codependence and that external approval or validation or image and really discovering, what like what from inside makes me tick and makes me go. That's so powerful. Well, I want to thank you both so much for your openness and insights that you've shared today. It's been really amazing hearing about your journeys, the work that you're doing now, and then also the wisdom that you've gained along the way. It's hard to imagine 2 years ago, as we were still in phase one, just this point where we're at now. And so before we wrap up, finally, I just want to ask if there's anything else that either of you would like to share. Maybe there's something I didn't ask about or something that just feels important.
For me, I feel like I'm marveling at the fact that we are all here 2 years later. Now that you bring that up, and some slower than others, right? I mean, our journeys are different, and that's how it's going to look for everyone. And just the I don't know. It just warms my heart that we're here, and everything that you guys have to offer, and it's a beautiful company to work for, and it's so healing, and it's the people that really make it work. So not even the material, it's the people.
I had a thought while you were speaking, and now it's just completely escaped me. But yes, I agree. It is completely the people. Yeah, I don't think that thought's coming back for another 5 minutes or so. So I'll pass.
All right, that's great. I think one of the things that I've loved about this journey is that, you know, to be able to have a thought and then to lose it, and it's like that's okay. It's gone for right now. No worries. Um, and I think in touching again on what I had said and what Charlene had said there is like that 2 years. I remember some facilitators like coming into this program and being so tensed up, rigid, bottled up in such a deep place of fear and pain from the things I'd gone through, and facilitators saying, "I was where you were 2 years ago." And there's a huge part of me. I was just like, "Oh, it feels too good to be true. I don't know if I believe you. I don't really know if I believe you, but that would be so amazing." And so, yeah, just to kind of have that reminder of what a difference like these 2 years have been, and just that it is a journey, and it is a continuing journey and a continuing process. Yeah,
I remembered my thought.
yeah,
That is that, yes, the people are what make the difference. And I feel so close to you too. But the other thing that I guess the point that I wanted to make is I feel close to you too, but I have never met either of you in person. I know some people, there are some people who come in and go like, oh, it's a video call. I mean, how connected can you really get? But there is such deep connection. There is such knowing each other because of what we have been through together. It does not require being there physically in person. I would love to meet you both one day in person, but that deep connection can still be felt across the screen.
well, thank you so much for having been on this journey with me for the last 2 years, and thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. This
Thank you
means
for
a lot
asking.
personally, and I know it'll help others as well. So thanks again, and I'm looking forward to catching up soon, and maybe we can maybe 2025 can have something in person as well. Thanks so much, you two.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Andy.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care, and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.